Dear friends, I'm going to talk about how to create a pleasant learning experience in our classrooms. This is really a very challenging job for majority of teachers today to create a very pleasant learning experience. I would say any teacher who has some idea about learner-centric approach or who has got some exposure or knowledge or expertise in learner-centered language teaching can make the learning process quite customized for the learners, can really go to the level of the learner, understand the learner's competencies, or rather, I would say, learner's learning time and learner's learning style and challenges, and could pitch in at the appropriate level to make sure that learning takes place very smoothly. But is that possible for us to do all the time? That's something that we have to really ask ourselves. Yes, it is possible. Sometimes we have compulsions to complete the curriculum before the semester examination, especially in our colleges. So that could be really thought about. But even at schools, I would say teachers have compulsions to complete it because the entire curriculum process or curriculum implementation, the implementation is determined by the testing system. The testing is actually to assess what progress has the learner made or what was the achievement of the learner in mastering certain parts of knowledge or certain parts of curriculum given there. I would say testing is only to reflect on the learning progress. Testing shouldn't be considered the absolute objective for which the entire curriculum is being implemented. So that is something that we have to really keep in mind when we design and develop a curriculum and implement a curriculum. Right. Okay. Let's look at what sort of curriculum can attract learners. Learners would possibly think about activity-based learning because they'll be interested in activity-based learning. When I say activity-based learning, I'm talking about learners being interested uh, in pairing with the other learners or in group activities. So a teacher has to be an activity organizer, a learning facilitator. At the same time, the teacher has to make sure that learning happens in a more informal manner, even outside the classroom. In other words, learning has to be facilitated in the classroom. The extensive learning takes place when the learners are together, even outside the classroom. In other words, we make learners think about the entire process of learning. We help them to strategize learning process even at home by exploring on their own through internet or through listening to podcasts or reading certain books or journals or handouts, etc. So the participative learning process can happen only when learners are free to explore their ideas, exchange their views and perspectives with one another. But is it happening all the time? It is not happening at all. Why is it so? Learners do not have time to interact with others, and they have a lot of other activities to do. In other words, they spend a lot of their time in entertainment activities, or rather they spend a lot of time doing their homework. So this is a problem. The problem is again that learning to learn has never been our focus. We never train the students to understand how to learn. So there has to be exclusive training given to learners to understand how to make learning, quite interesting, how to enjoy learning process. So learning can be a pleasant experience only when a teacher understands this very participative learning process, gets the instantaneous feedback of the learners, give a sandwich feedback on learners' progress, and compliment the learners whenever the learner makes a subtle learning ahead of others, or even if learner understands something very important, ensure that the learner is complimented, appreciated. So appreciating learners could be a very important step that we take towards making learning a very pleasant experience in the second language education. And then what else can we do? We can provide online learning support for the learners. So how do we provide online learning support? Which is very important that we have indigenous online support systems created in our pedagogy, in our curriculum, etc. So the teachers can reach out to learners wherever they are, whenever they have access to such learning systems. Then learning happens all through the time, all through the day. So it is not necessarily that it takes place only within a particular time frame, a time schedule in a particular place. No, learners now have access to internet, can sit at home, could do some micro learning as part of their entire learning process. So there could be animation movies, or there could be digitized content, there could be testing based learning solutions uh, given to these learners. Remember, that makes learning very interesting and funny. There could be even online uh, grammar games, vocabulary games, etc. could be given. So there are multiple ways of making learning very interesting. The learning has to be multi-sensory and multimedia oriented. That is my absolute aim, because I always ensure that learning happens not just through visual inputs or auditory inputs, through all the other inputs as well. So we'll have to consider how to make learning more interesting for the learners on a day-to-day basis. And the teacher has to think about creating multiple ways of reaching out to the learners. For example, I've seen in a college where I worked, we had several paintings of the great writers and on the walls. When somebody enters the department room, they would find the photos of Percy Bysshe Shelley or John Keats or Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge. All these great poets and writers are on display. So that creates an ambience. So creating a pleasant ambience of learning is a very, very important step. Then what else can we do? We'll have to also think about giving them an opportunity to go ahead with extensive learning process. Is it really possible to do it? There is a possibility if a teacher can come up with, say for example, a program in the community radio. There are several colleges today which have launched community radio programs, community radio channels. That is one of the best ways to reach out to students. There could be even an exclusive, podcast made by the teacher to support the learners. Or the teacher can come up with a YouTube channel to support the learners. What else can the teacher do? The teacher also could create awareness among the learners on what are the other resources available. You can think about identifying such resources and create a video library or a library of such YouTube playlists. Say, for example, if you're going to talk about legal English and you would like to list out the vocabulary related to jurisprudence, you can make a list of videos available. Say, for example, Stanford lectures on jurisprudence, or Harvard lectures on jurisprudence, or Cambridge lectures on jurisprudence, or JNU lectures on jurisprudence, or for that matter, any other series of lectures available, and ensure that's being rendered as a source, as a resource for our students to come up with their own learning strategies. They could master the vocabulary by watching those videos, listing out those vocabulary. But we will have to give them a sample listing process. It is our duty to provide them a sample listing process. And most important of all is providing a very pleasant feedback, having an excellent rapport with our learners. Learners expect us to respond to them all the time. So learner-centric language teaching is very important and help the learners to reflect on their learning process quite often on their own. So give them some time at the end of your classes to reflect and tell you what have they learned, how they have found that experience of learning, what is so special about it, etc. So these are things that you have to keep in mind when you want to create a pleasant learning experience. Apart from all I have mentioned, the teacher has to be a very humorous person. The teacher has to have a sense of humor to attract the learners and should provide various other inputs like visual inputs, or for example certain short films, short anecdotes, and narrate certain short stories, or zen stories or folk tales, etc. And the teacher should also create a cross-cultural awareness among the second language learners. Could even make use of bilingualism to make sure that learners learn whatever we wanted them to learn. So that would possibly help the learners to learn things faster and better. If you have any questions or doubts, you can always write to me. You can visit me at www.manglapratapan.com. That is MangalaPrathapan.com. Thank you very much for listening to me. Please subscribe to this channel, and if you have any questions, you're free to talk to me. I'm there to support you. Good luck to you. Have a great day. Bye bye.